Let's see. Okay, disclaimer. The opinions expressed on this forum is not representative of PLN's official stance. RX's opinion is based on the information available at the time and not PLN's official stance. Not everyone who calls in is a TI. The gang stalkers have a tendency to pretend to be TIs and interfere with activities related to TIs. PLN and RX can't guarantee that TI Hour participants, including guests, are real TIs, or if what is being
Recording started.
or if what is being said by anyone is true. This isn't to invalidate anyone, but to take into consideration that gang stalkers sometimes pretend to be TIs. Okay, with that said, let's get started. Sorry, I am all over the place today. Okay, here. All right, so let's see. So this, so as you can see, we're gonna listen to a book today, and this is actually because someone, while I was doing Should TIs Date, someone wrote that they were more interested in electronic harassment. So I said, let me do something to kind of start the ball rolling on electronic harassment. So let me read this disclaim. Well, let me start. Okay. So last time I narrated the movie Gaslight. It is a movie that has been referenced by a lot of TIs, but I wasn't sure how many people actually watched the movie. It was important to watch it because it helps explain the term and shows how one type of psychopath, and it shows one type of psychopath. Anyone who watches that video can reference the movie like a pro now, except there is a more popular version of the video, and that may be the one everyone references. Either way, after watching the version I narrated, you can see more details in the more popular version and appear well versed in how the movie shaped the term. I turned the 3 videos into an Intro to Psychopaths crash course because when I reviewed the Should TIs Date video, before reviewing the Listen to Gaslight videos, it actually made more sense. The Should TIs Date video foreshadowed the Gaslight movie, and it was cool to actually see a psychopath in action instead of just listening to the victims and mental health professionals' accounts. I think that after taking that free crash course, a person who is new to all this will have a better understanding of the psychopath. To get the most out of the crash course, you have to just pick a day that you can sit down and watch or listen to the video for 6 hours. I suggest taking about 10 to 15-minute breaks in between, but you want to make sure that you pay attention. And sometimes if you're sitting here and you're just watching videos, you might like lose sight. So if you find yourself kind of like dozing, just like take a 10-minute break and then come back and then watch, continue the crash course, or 10 or 15 minutes, however long you need. And if you have a short attention span, then plan it out in a way that works for you. You really could listen to the videos instead of watching. Because really you're just watching me, so you aren't really missing anything by just listening, right? I've tried doing other things. I have tried doing other things while listening to a video, and I found that I heard what was being said, but I wasn't paying attention, and I missed a few things. So I would have to like go back and rewind the video and everything. So I found that listening while not doing anything else, but maybe like jotting down a few notes was better. PLN, so maybe you want to take that into consideration. PLN also has a Psychopaths 101 course, which is around $200, and the course is once a week for a month. It follows a similar format as the crash course, except instead of the facilitator narrating, you will actually watch the movie together. And there are also discussion groups and other things to help you learn how to spot a narcissist, psychopath, or identify narcissistic, psychopathic abuse better. I am the facilitator right now, but that may change in the future so that you are not surprised. All right, let me make sure no one's saying anything. Okay, so I'm going to continue. All right. So I could also do a follow-up to the Intro to Psychopaths crash course with a course that is based on the videos in the crash course, but you don't have to watch the whole movie again. So I will facilitate it through a live stream conference or some sort I was facilitated through a live stream conference of some sort, and there will be discussions and some additional material since after taking the free course, everyone should be on the same page and will know what everyone else is talking about when they reference the course material. That, of course, would cost money, and if you're interested, let me know by sending an email. The course requires a group discussion, so either you can get a group together, so you can have your own private group session, and I would charge a group rate, or if you are just one person, I will wait until I have enough participants to form a group for discussion purposes, and then I will start the course. The contact email will be listed in the YouTube video's description box for those who are interested after I finish this video. Okay. So, with all that said, a lot of people want to talk about electronic harassment. It's one of the touchy subjects in this whole gang stalking thing. It's a touchy subject because there is no publicly accepted hard proof, even though TIs have already put out so much information. And even though I have let the public hear some of the voices used in electronic harassment in the covert convo videos and the go and subliminal videos, some people still don't believe that electronic harassment is real. They don't believe that, what I showed them is real. So I decided I got to delve into this or give at least a basic intro. So now, TIs, please understand that I am making these TI hour shows with both TIs and the general public in mind. So there's a lot of basic information. The show is really meant to be a discussion where TIs do most of the talking, but since there isn't that many viewers or people chatting or calling in, I'm improvising a bit. It's still a show for TIs to discuss what is happening to them, but until there is more participation, I will use it as a way to help TIs better understand what is happening to them and to help the general public see where the things TIs believe are coming from. Because right now, they just don't know, or at least they have like a slight idea. So, Gaslight is a movie that is referenced a lot, and one book that is referenced a lot, but probably not enough, is Physical Control of the Mind Towards a Psychocivilized Society by Jose Delgado. All right. So that the general public, or the audience as I call them from time to time, will know that so that the general public or audience will know the basics of TI's electronic harassment and how it's rooted in real science, and for TIs to reference this book like a pro. The next few TI hours will be listening to this book with commentaries. There will be a weekly TI hour, there will be weekly free TI hours for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, including this one. So next week I'm going to have a TI hour, and the week after that I'm going to have a TI hour so we can finish this book. This 3-week book club, okay, you're part of a book club now if you're watching. It's temporary. Will also show some features of PLN's Patreon. Will also show some features of PLN's Patreon book club. I'm in charge of the Patreon, and as soon as I get a certain number of patrons, I will start a book club, and it will be similar to the next few free TI hours. Similar, not exactly the same. So I wanted to start. Let me just make sure no one's saying anything, so I'm not ignoring you. Okay, awesome. Well, not awesome, but all right. Awesome that I didn't miss anything. All right. So let's talk a little bit about my research. Okay. I broke this research up into 2 parts. A hypothesis can apply to an experiment or a research. I'm applying the following hypothesis to the research. So the hypothesis for the first part of my research will be something like, is the stalking that TIs claim is happening possible? I have enough information to basically prove that the stalking by proxy part is possible and actual. The second hypothesis for the other part of the research will be something like, is electronic harassment real, or is it a PTSD side effect of being a TI? TIs. That is not a slap in the face. The way science works is that you have to prove your theory, and you have to do so in a way that other scientists or researchers can get the same results as you doing the same things. The reason why I stated the hypothesis that way is because I can pretty much prove the stalking is possible, but the electronic harassment part is harder to prove at this point in time. Even if the general public believes that the stalking part Excuse me, even if the general public believes in the stalking part, electronic harassment is still an issue. If I prove that the stalking part of gang stalking is real, I know that another researcher or mental health professional may say that electronic harassment may be the stress effects of being stalked by the psychopathic network. That makes sense, doesn't it? However, since I have gone subliminal, I know that electronic harassment is probably more than that. So I wanted the hypothesis to reflect a logical inference and kind of work around that since it will probably come up. So before I started reading the book, I came across an interesting word, electroceuticals. I looked it up and it wasn't a term that TIs made up. It is widely accepted in the general public. And here is a definition from Science Direct. So, electroceuticals. Electroceuticals are a new category of therapeutic agents which act by targeting the neural circuits of organs. The therapy involves mapping the neural circuitry and delivering neural impulses to these specific targets. The impulse is administered via an implantable device. So, definition, electroceuticals is a recently coined term for an old therapeutic modality that broadly encompasses all bioelectronic medicine. It includes any type of electric stimulation to affect and modify functions of the body. Neural implants such as cochlear implants, retinal implants, or spinal cord stimulators for pain relief, but also cardiac pacemakers and implantable defibrillators. Recently, the field has expanded to include deep brain stimulation and the electrical stimulation of the vagus nerve, also called bioelectronics. The idea, excuse me, also called bioelectronics. The idea is that I kind of confused myself, but I'm not going to read that. Okay, actually, I will. It includes any type of electrical stimulation to affect and modify functions of the body, neural implants such as cochlear implants, retinal implants, or spinal cord stimulators for pain relief, but also cardiac pacemakers and implantable defibrillators. Recently, the field has expanded to include deep brain stimulation and the electrical stimulation of the vagus nerve. Also, okay, also called bioelectronics, the idea is that tiny electronic implants will be able to treat a vast range of chronic diseases such as diabetes, asthma, chronic obstructive airways, arthritis, hypertension, and other heart ailments and gastrointestinal diseases. And then in another article in Science Direct called Electroceuticals in Medicine, The Brave New Future. Um, I think that was what I read. Oh no, I was gonna post. Let me post that for you so that you could look that up. And that's where I just got that from. Hold on. All right. All right. Featured article. I'm just putting the link to what I just read so that you could check it out yourself and read the article. It is quite interesting. All right. Featured article, electroceuticals. Okay. So that is what I just read. And let's see. I'm gonna post it. If you're listening to me on TalkShoe, I'm gonna post that up in a minute. I just want to get this started. Okay, and this. Okay, so that was a great intro to the book because electronic harassment often leads to electronic illness. The general public talks about electroceuticals to heal, and TIs talk about a similar technology that is used to hurt or cause illness. Maybe the TIs are warning about what can happen if electroceuticals get into the wrong hands. I will post a link to a very basic article about electronic illness that PLN wrote so that you know what I'm talking about when I say electronic harassment. It's not like it's just that's a coin I just termed it. It's not like well known or anything because electronic harassment is not well known. During next week's book reading, you will see what is okay. During next week, not this week, because I broke this book up into like several parts so that we could get through it. But during next week's book reading, you will see that what is supposedly the new electroceutical has been attempted before. So it's not a new science, but again, it did say that in the little brief that I read you. So let me just post this in talk shoe before I forget. because I probably will forget. Article. Okay. All right. So we're reading this book. So you can either buy and read the book with Scribd, SCRBD, Barnes and Nobles or Amazon if you want. Right now, it's very expensive. It's like $100, $80 for this book. It used to be around $10 on Kindle, but the ebook was pulled. That's what I got. I've had this book for 2 years, and I started reading it and then I stopped and I was like, okay, I got to read this book. I got to read this book. And so one of the reasons why I'm reading with you is because it's going to force me to finally read the book. So it's 2 years later. I'm finally getting through getting getting to reading the book. Okay, the Scribd one, SCRBD, is available, but I'm not sure if there's a free for a limited time offer or if you have to pay to read it. I'll let you know which chapters are being read during each show. There's only 3 shows on this topic, on this intro. You can read it ahead of time, so you can comment or ask questions if you want. Even if you don't understand what you are reading, try to read it anyway because we're going to discuss it so that you can get a better understanding of the book. Remember that you don't have to agree with what I say, and this is to help you get a better understanding of some of the things that helped electronic harassment come about. Either way, make some tea or coffee and get a snack, nothing crunchy because you want to hear everything. Sit back and listen to the book and my commentary. If you want, you can chat in. I'm not narrating, so I can respond sometimes. And also be aware that when you start typing or taking notes, you might miss some of the information being read. You can take brief notes so you don't miss anything and ask questions during the commentary. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. This is TI Hour, a time for TIs to talk or chat in. And I have my notes, so I probably won't lose my place anyway. Sorry, I got hair in my face. Hair in my eye. All right. So to the book finally. I'm sorry I gave a long intro, but it's all necessary. It's all necessary. Okay. So physical control of the mind towards a psychocivilized society was probably written for people who had some background in the book's field of study. This means that the general public may have some difficulty fully understanding some of the ideas. This also means that there are no stupid questions. And since this isn't my field of study, I won't be able to answer all your questions. However, there could be discussions that could help whoever asks the questions that maybe I can't answer to seek more information and get closer to an answer. So during the commentaries, I'm giving basic explanations, not as thorough as an expert in the book's field of study would offer. It's just enough to give a basic understanding, and you can look further into the topic if you want. Okay. This may all seem boring to you, but TIs, I'm giving you tools to be more knowledgeable about what is happening. Um, so, so just bear with me. I know you're like, oh, she talks about these boring things and stuff, but you really need to know this. I think that TIs need to be well versed in this also, because it's going to help you while you're out there advocating, or you're out there protesting, while you're out there having interviews and trying to explain your cause. What I'm telling you and what I'm trying to help you understand is going to help you prove, not if not prove, at least talk about better and be more convincing when you talk. And here is a PDF. It's free. I should have wrote something, right? I'll figure out what to write later. But that's, if you want to, you can go to that now. I'm gonna reference it. It is a free version of the book. I think was made by PACS, PACTS, which I think is like a TI organization of some sort. I don't remember what it stands for or anything, but yeah, it's from them and PACS International. I think I should have looked more into it. But that's the PDF. It's free. You could access it now so that you could read along. However, this does not have chapter 6, but it has chapter 7 and so forth. There are also missing sentences or paragraphs in various parts of the PDF I'm giving you, or linking of the link I just gave you, but it can still work for this purpose. So I'm warning you now, the first half hour or more of this is going to be boring. Okay, but bear with me. Reading these parts are important and it definitely will get better. So what I did was just I skipped 5 chapters because you're gonna just fall asleep if I if we had to read that. So, because we're at the point that I think most people are right now, it would just be boring to them and they wouldn't understand it. But I think like after you go through the whole book, you could go back to the 5 chapters and the first 5 chapters and it'll make more sense to you. So with that said, my long intro, let's get started. Here's the book. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play why didn't I think I wrote that I was going to do divide it up into 15-minute sections. And then I thought I wrote okay, I'm gonna divide it up into 15-minute sections, just like I did with the movie, and then I'm gonna comment every 15 minutes. So let me get started. It might run over 15 minutes, but I mean over 3 hours, but I'm trying not to let it. It probably will though, but whatever. So here it is. Here, let's get started with the book. Okay. So that was the first 15 minutes. You got through it. Okay. Well, a lot of you are probably like, oh my God, what is going on? What is this person saying? You don't have to understand all of it. This chapter is kind of dense, you know. And unless you're into that stuff, you're probably like, huh? So don't worry about it. All right. But I think maybe like once we get through the book, you can go back and understand just a little bit more. And then if you want to do watch some basic like anatomy videos and stuff, you could probably get it. So anyway, so I'm doing this because when TIs talk about, and I don't know if I read this or not, but I'm doing this because when TIs talk about some topics such as MK Ultra, electronic harassment, Project Monarch, etc., the general public has no idea what you're talking about. Most of them haven't heard of these things, and they probably won't look into it. So there is a wide gap between TIs and the audience or the general public. So part of bridging the gap is to give a basic explanation of some of the TI's main topics so that the audience can have a basic idea of what the TIs are talking about. New TIs can also have a basic understanding of what they are experiencing. Both will have a better understanding so that each can make a better decision on whether or not to look deeper into the issue. So, new TIs probably should look into the issue because it's something that affects them more than, well, I don't know more than the general public, but it's something that they're more aware of and more aware of its effects than the general public. And then the general public could see, whether or not this is something they want to look into because it affects them, whether or not they want to admit it, or whether or not they know it. Because if you don't know, you're just a sitting duck. But anyway, so that's why I'm doing this. So let me just give a commentary on the first 15 minutes. So the author believes in a mindless newborn brain, meaning that the newborn is a blank slate. The author believes that the neonate, or commonly known as the newborn, is reflexive or instinctual. It has natural reflex reactions like sneezing or the knee kick when the right spot is hit. Like when you go to doctors, they hit a certain part of your knee kind of like bumps up a little bit. So they think everything is just instinctual and reflexive. There's no mind or reason. In it, he said that there were some newborns born without a brain or only parts of a brain, and they're also known as anencephalic. That word is hard for me. Anencephalic, anencephalic babies. They lived only a few days, but were able to act like normal babies, with the main difference being that they weren't able to develop new behaviors quickly. They were stuck at whatever they were born with. Then he goes into different experiments and theories. This chapter is kind of dry, but bear with me. That's why I skipped the first 5 chapters, because even though they give a good background, if you're not familiar with this field of study, it just sounds like gibberish to you. So once you finish reading or listening to this book, and maybe going into more depth by looking up information on your own and feel like you have a firm basic understanding. I mean, I'm not going to make you experts by the time we finish this book, but you're going to have a basic understanding, and you can go back and read those 5 chapters and it will probably make more sense to you, and you probably won't fall asleep while reading them. So what I don't want TIs to watch other TI videos and just regurgitate what the videos say. I want TIs to be able to watch those videos, understand, question, and discuss what those videos say. Remember that gang stalkers pretend to be TIs, and a lot of them pretend to be smart. They could be saying stuff and the TI may be repeating what they say and look stupid. I'm trying to give you a better understanding so that you can better decide what to repeat, what to look into a bit deeper, and what is just BS. It's worth your time, even though it is a bit boring. So with that, let's get into the next 15 minutes. So before we get into chapter 7, if you decide to look into this, there was like a wealth of information in that 15 minutes. It's just incredible. It's kind of funny because this is like your first time hearing it, but since I had to hear it one time to make notes and stuff, this is my second time. I'm like, whoa. Anyway, but I'm a nerd, so if you're not a nerd, or if you're not, there's different kinds of nerds. You could be a tech nerd, you could be a biology nerd, you could be a physics nerd. If you're not my kind of nerd, it's probably not your thing. But anyway, my type of nerd. All right, so let's go over that 15 minutes. So, what it basically says, a large brain doesn't mean intelligence. The quality of the mind is more important. Thinking is developed and it's not innate. So you're not born knowing how to do math. Okay, that's something you learn. So, or you're not born, learning how to do puzzles. That's something that you learn. So, having a brain does not mean that you can think or you are intelligent. This is common knowledge. Now, if you were a psychopathic scientist bent on controlling everyone around you, how can you use that common knowledge to help your agenda? Science is a power field that can attract many psychopaths because scientists have intellectual clout just by holding the title, although some are charlatans. So if you go up to someone, you're like, I'm a scientist, they automatically think you're smart, even if you're not. So they also study how nature works. Scientists also study how nature works, and nature is the powerful force that controls the world. You get the picture? I didn't come to the following conclusion on my own, but after observing the extreme psychopaths in the gang stalking network, and I think that's important because I just don't want I'm sitting around thinking of these diabolical things. What I'm telling you is through observation, and it blows my mind because I just don't think like that. I was raised in a human society. So some of the things these beasts do is just like, whoa. It takes me a while to get it. But once I get it, I can explain it to you. So that's what that sentence is about. I don't want, it's the stuff that they do is so disturbing, is that I don't want to like claim that I thought it up. Anyway, so let's go back. Common knowledge says that having a brain doesn't mean you can think, assuming that thinking means having reasoning and intellectual abilities, right? So, however, having a brain means that you could be a functional human being. You can do things. And that's what they were. Yeah, you can do things. Let's leave it simple. So you learned earlier that most babies born without a brain die. So that could mean that most of the population that is still living has a fully developed brain and are fully functional. If they don't think, then they just do. If they don't think, then they will probably just do as they are told. As a psychopathic scientist, that is what you want, a fully functional group of people who don't think so you can tell them what to do. So earlier, you learned about experiments done to interfere with people and animals' mental development. That was the first 15 minutes. Most of these were done by altering the environment, and some occurred naturally. So keep all this in mind as the book will go into using technology to affect the mind. So even though, like I said, this first half hour is dense, okay, the first few um, 15 minutes are going to be dense, but it all it circles back and it's going to make sense later. So back to what we were saying. The book says that the baby brain is entirely dependent on information that comes from the outside. If the non-thinking brain is similar to the baby brain, that leaves so much possibility for someone controlling the mind. Going back to what was learned about narcissists and psychopaths in the previous weeks, Mr. Mellon, the husband, kept his wife in a state of distress so that she couldn't think. Even though he couldn't technologically regress her to a baby brain, he psychologically interfered with or tried to stop her thinking. So I think, so if we go back to cognitive dissonance, her mind just got so jumbled that she was just like, I can't think. And she didn't even want to think because it kind of like hurt because she was so confused, right? Her head was hurting and stuff. So she stopped thinking. So the discomfort of cognitive dissonance usually stops people from thinking or thinking too much. This can lead to not thinking, which can lead to a non-thinking brain that can easily be controlled because the baby brain or non-thinking brain is entirely dependent on information that comes from the outside. From the outside. Okay. The baby brain or non thinking brain is entirely dependent on information that comes from the outside, which means someone else tells you what is real, shapes your reality, or controls your mind. The statement in the book was specific to language development, but later the book says it's true for many mental functions. You can listen to that section again during the replay. So that kind of like gives you some background, some scientific background, even though I don't think psychopaths are thinking about it scientifically, unless, they're psychologists or maybe like scientists who study the mind and stuff. I don't think they're sitting there like, oh, I'm going to do this and that. They don't, because they're predators. They kind of like learn. Oh my God, it's kind of scary, isn't it? It's kind of like instinctual for them to like do this to you because they have that predatory mindset. So I hope that kind of explains a little bit about why they don't want you to think. Because if you don't think, they can tell you what to do. So that's why, like, psychopaths always try to get their victims in a state of distress, in a state where they don't want to think, they don't want to do anything, they just want to like, just leave me alone, just leave me alone, because then you're more apt to do when you don't think. Okay, I feel like I'm being repetitive, but let's go on to the next 15 minutes.
Mutual.
All right. Isn't this fun? It's like sitting in a lecture. I like his voice. It's like listening to professor talk. But like I said, maybe it's not your thing. Let's see. All right. So before I said that the predatory nature of a psychopath is instinctual, I may have misspoke. It might be instinctual, but I have observed things that suggest that the predatory impulse is not nature, but could be nurture, or the predatory impulse of psychopaths and narcissists can be learned. So I wanted to clarify that. So back to this 15 minutes. So a sentence that is interesting that he read was exhaustion and decreased sensory inputs are known to cause mental disturbances and reduce defense mechanisms. And if you brought up the PDF that I gave you the link to, that's on page 10. So now we're in chapter 7. So now you could actually go back and read. You could read along if you want. I found it frustrating. Like when I was listening, I kind of got frustrated because there were some things I wanted to look at, and I had to like go back and like rewind the MP4, and it got annoying. But then when I found this PDF, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to. So you could go back and read it. I'll tell you where the pages are. So anyway, so okay, let's start over. So a sentence that is interesting in the book is exhaustion and decreased sensory inputs are known to cause mental disturbances and reduce defense mechanisms, and that's on page 10. The sensory inputs part is important because when I go subliminal, I hear a lot about getting the senses. It seems like they're obsessed with getting senses, and I never understood what that meant until I learned a bit more about their really cringeworthy environment, and then I understood why they want your senses, right? And it's scary when you hear it in the subliminal environment, right? Because you hear like a voice saying that, you're like, oh my God. But anyway, so going subliminal is all about electronic harassment and observing the beasts in their subliminal world, which is quite different from reality. It's like a horror film. I still can't believe it's real. So the book also mentions that a person's history shapes his or her mind. It says we must realize that the anatomical structure of the brain has not evolved perceptibly in the past several millenniums of man's history. What has changed is the amount of information received by the brain and the training to deal with it. The major differences between a caveman and a modern scientist are not genetic, but environmental and cultural. See, that's it, and that's on page 11. That's very interesting. And the training to deal with it. Okay. So I'm not going to go into that. So he's saying that there has been no significant structural change in the brain since the caveman days. There has been only environmental and cultural differences that have allowed advancements. What could that mean? What could that mean? It means that if the environment and culture that has allowed progress is removed, then the primitive mind or the caveman mentality will appear. So what? A beast actually called the gang stalking network a subculture. That was the first time I ever heard like anything being described as a subculture. Um, and TIs have seen their environments. The TI's environments have changed as the beasts move in, isolate the TI from the real world. Basically, trying to regress the TI to the primitive mind and then to the non thinking mind. What does that have to do with electronic harassment? Scientists like to give, so what does that have to do with electronic harassment? So scientists like to give a background to whatever the main topic is. And that's pretty much what we've been doing from chapter 7. Chapter 1 through 5, actually chapter 1 through 7 is basically the background. Delgado's giving you a background into his research. He hasn't even really talked about what he's done yet, but scientists like to do that. And you know what? It makes sense. It's like when you watch a movie, you gotta like in the first parts of the movie, you're kind of like meeting the characters, you're learning a little bit about them, and it's kind of dull, right? It was not dull, but you know, you're just like, but it's since it's movies nowadays are really social, so since you're like a social being, you're like, "Oh my god, it's like meeting someone except you're meeting a character," right? And books, fictional books do that. And then you get into the action. This is pretty much it. It's just that a lot of people don't like science, and that hurts my feelings, but a lot of people don't like science. A lot of people don't really get science, but this is pretty much it. Delgado's kind of like introducing you to his research. He's introducing you to his research by like talking about stuff that's come before, stuff that's relevant to his research. And like I said, it's slow and it's dull, but it's necessary. Like the first parts of the movie where you're meeting the character, you're learning about the character, and then the action begins, right? So, it may seem long, boring, and irrelevant, but once they get to the point, it will all make sense. So keep listening, it will all come together. And yeah. I don't know if what I just explained about, the beast, so, I mean, I feel like I need to clarify that. So I said that the beast, if you remove means environment, culture, progress, okay. So, what I think the beasts are doing is that when they get a TI and they isolate the TI and then they surround the TI with nothing but beasts, because a lot of TIs, sometimes you feel like you go out and all you see are beasts. There are humans there. I don't know if it was intro to gang stalking on Tenani, but one of them goes into no, it was one of the Tenani episodes, and they do the M&M experiments, which is really good because I think it'll help you feel better. I forgot what it was though. So if you see, I think on the thumbnail, it has a picture of M&Ms, but it's just to show you that it's kind of to show you like how you're just surrounded by bees, but all outside the little circle of bees, there's like human society that you're so used to, you love, and you grew up in. So just remember that. So what I think happened is like if you see TIs, you grew up in a human society surrounded by humans. Once you start getting gang stalked, what's going to happen are the beasts are going to move in and kind of surround you. So they're removing you from that culture and environment that you're used to. And by doing that, they're kind of like trying to remove what you've learned. And if all that's removed, you're kind of like back to the primitive mind, because here you are in an environment that you've never been. Like, not a lot, psychopaths wear a human mask, and not a lot of people get to see psychopaths without their human mask. So as a TI, you're in an environment where you see psychopaths without their mask on, and it's scary as hell, right? You're just like, what the heck? What kind of people are these? And in that way, the culture and environment that you're used to is gone, and you're kind of like a baby in a new environment. So you're kind of like back to, like, I don't want to say primitive, you're kind of like relying on your instincts and stuff, because this environment, you haven't learned how to cope in it yet. So that's why I feel like sometimes, and that's why I guess that's what I'm trying to kind of explain. It's like when they surround you and stuff, they kind of regress you to the primitive mind, because they're moving your culture, they're moving your environment and what you're used to. So you're kind of like back to baby status, because here you are around a bunch of people and in a world where you're just like, oh my God, I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do. So that's what I was trying to explain. And I hope I clarified. So with that, okay, so that was the first few 15 minutes. And it's gonna get better. I think this is part of the last of the boring not boring. I know you're gonna think I don't think it's boring, but you're gonna think it's boring. But let me just get to it.
Dependence.
Now we're getting into his research, so it's gonna get more interesting and more relevant. The book states that neurophysiological investigation has established correlations between mental phenomenon and psychochemical changes in the central nervous system and specific electrical responses of different areas of the brain can be identified following sensory stimulation of the eye with patterns, shapes, or movements. Advances in other scientific areas have proved that mental functions and human behavior can be modified by surgery, frontal lobotomy, by electronics, brain stimulation, and by chemistry, drug administration, thus placing the mind within the experimental reach. Ooh. This paragraph is about reaching the mind and eventually controlling it. Trying to control or manipulate someone's mind is nothing new. Persuasion is the most well regarded and fair way to influence other people's minds, to influence a person's mind. However, persuasion is not a skill. It isn't, excuse me. However, persuasion is not only a skill, it is an art, and not a lot of people have that ability. Next is manipulation and deception, which is used by people who have no persuasion skills and low to no morals. I mean, I think if someone has persuasion skills, they're less likely to use manipulation and deception because, I think persuasion is probably like top notch, right? Once you get there, why would you even lower yourself to manipulation or deception? But so back to the manipulative and deceptive people. These disgusting types of people will call their manipulation and deceit, persuasion, and intelligence to make it sound better. There are also lazy people who don't have persuasion skills and don't feel like making a web of manipulation and deceit. These people these disgusting types will rush to a technological control of the mind, basically getting people to do what they want with the push of a button. Now, when I describe someone as disgusting, most of the times I'm referring to the members of the gang stalking network. I don't know if Delgado was a member of this network. He passed away in 2011, so I can't talk to him. Therefore, I will say that it appears that he was interested in offering an alternative to lobotomies and didn't seem to have a psychopathic desire to control other people's minds and bodies. With that said, if his research got into the wrong hands, then you could imagine what could happen, especially if that research has been advancing underground and covertly funded. Is that possible? Yes. Is that what happened? Has some research that has been publicly shut down been advancing privately or even in other countries with little or no bioethics or research ethic committees? Is that unheard of? Is it crazy to think that could have happened or that could be happening? I'll leave you to answer that for yourself. And I'll also add that a lot of drugs testing and administration, excuse me, a lot of testing for new drugs and stuff can fall into I'm trying to say in a way, okay. A lot of, okay, so when a drug, so when okay, in the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm not in the pharmaceutical industry, but when there's a drug made, they usually like to give it to people to see the effects. Some companies, if they can't get the FDA and the other committees to allow them to experiment on those drugs or do research on the drugs to see how it affects human beings in the United States, they will take it somewhere else and they will run their tests to see if the drug is effective, and they can start selling the drug in other countries way before it reaches the US. And a lot of times that happens because the FDA or some committees and authorities in the US won't allow the drugs to come here until this and that has been done. And likewise, sometimes, researchers from other countries come here because pharmaceutical researchers come here because the US will allow some drug testing and research that their countries don't allow. So with that added information, I'll leave you to decide for yourself if that could have happened with Delgado's research. There is an article in which Delgado was quoted. It said, "But human nature," Delgado asserts, echoing one of the exhilarating and slightly scary themes of physical control, "is not static but dynamic. constantly changing as a result of our compulsive self exploration. Can you avoid knowledge? Delgado asked. You cannot. Can you avoid technology? You cannot. There are things are going to go ahead in spite of ethics, in spite of your personal beliefs, in spite of everything. Delgado said that. And I'll leave that for you to make your own decision. All right. So, another part of the book, it says the working hypothesis may be summarized as follows. There are basic mechanisms in the brain responsible for all mental activities, including perception, emotions, abstract thoughts, social relations, and the most refined artistic creations. Two, the mechanisms may be detected, analyzed, influenced, and sometimes substituted for by means of physical and chemical technology. That's pretty much known. This approach does not claim that love or thoughts are exclusively neurophysiological phenomenon, but accepts the obvious fact that the central nervous system is absolutely necessary for any behavioral manifestation. It plans to study the mechanisms involved. Three, predictable behavior and mental responses may be induced by direct manipulation of the brain. Four, we can substitute intelligent and purposeful determination of neuronal functions for blind automatic responses. Ooh. Okay, the main thing in this paragraph is we can substitute intelligent and purposeful determination of neuronal functions for blind automatic responses. Okay. And then in another part, it says the development of new methodologies, the development of new methodology to explore and communicate with the depth of the brain while the experimental subject engages in spontaneous or evoked activities now enables a scientist to analyze and control basic neurological mechanisms of the mind and represent a unique means of understanding the material and functional basis of individual structure. The future should see collaboration between those investigators who formerly study neuronal physiology while disregarding behavior, and other scientists who have been interested in behavior while ignoring the brain. And that was on page 14. And the other, I think, was on page 13. Sorry, I didn't give you the pages. So experiments usually start as a researcher asking you to do something while they look at how your body or mind is responding. But the thing that makes this weird is that it says explore and communicate with depths of the brain while the experimental subject engages in spontaneous or evoked activities. Now enables the scientist to analyze and control basic neurological mechanisms of the mind. This is basically saying that the scientist is distracting your mind while they do things to manipulate and control your body. If you come back for random talk, I'll show you videos of Delgado's approach with mental health patients, where he asks them to do something, distract their mind, while he pushes a button to control their bodies and even their emotions. Another important thing to note is that a lot of Delgado's research is done on mentally ill patients. Is it a coincidence that there is an attempt to drive TIs crazy in order to control them? Is it that a sane, sound mind is harder to control or manipulate than a crazed mind? Even in a non-gang stalking situation with the textbook psychopaths and narcissists, you notice that the psychopath tries to make their victims think they are going crazy, like Mr. Mellon trying to make Mrs. Mellon think she was crazy. So is destabilizing the victim's mind the trick of the psychopathic trade? Back to TIs. Could all the street theater and petty arguments and drama be a way to distract your mind, the TI's mind, so that electronic harassment could be more effective? TIs, if you notice an increase in electronic harassment when you are mentally distracted or stressed out, please leave it in the comments. Whether on the replay, I don't really have a lot of people watching right now, whether on the replay or now, whatever you want to, if you want to. I'm not sure if this explains it, but it could be something to look into on whether all that BS that you have to watch and go through, is that just meant to distract you so that electronic harassment could be more effective. So what I'm thinking about, like I watched a video of a TI showing how electronic harassment affects her. And she was just like, her head was nodding. It was interesting. And so I was wondering, if you come back and they just stressed you out while you were outside, and you come back into your home, and your home is they kind of like did stuff to your home to make it more feasible for them to electronic harass you. Would you feel the electronic harassment more now that your mind is distracted with all the problems and issues and dramas? So I guess that's what I'm saying. So, have you noticed that your electronic harassment has been worse after they've kind of like escalated the psychological attacks on you and harassment in the streets and drama at work or whatever that they've conjured up, Has the electronic harassment been more, or has it affected you more? So that's what I'm asking. So back to this. The following is from a table on pages 14 and 15 of the PDF that I sent you. Well, of the PDF link that I put in the chat box on the YouTube page and the TalkShoe page. So, stimulation of the diencephalon in unanesthetized cats evoked well-organized motor effects and emotional reactions, implying that motor and emotional manifestations may be evoked by electrical stimulation of the brain in awake animals. So what this is saying is that they used cats that were awake and not medicated or under anesthesia, and they were able to use electrical stimulation to make the cats do and feel, okay, that's kind of scary, feel what they wanted. The diencephalon relays, and later on he's going to explain how he made a cat feel a certain way, because you're like, how did you make a cat feel a certain way? He's going to explain it. The diencephalon relays sensory information between brain regions and contains many autonomic functions of the peripheral nervous system. It connects structures of the endocrine system with the nervous system and works with the limbic system structures to generate and manage emotions and memories. This explains why they stimulated the diencephalon. And this is scary because they were able to control a cat's body and emotions by stimulating a part of its brain while it was awake and under no anesthesia. That was a breakthrough in Delgado's day, because what they used to do was put the animal under, and then they would just zap it with stuff and see if its body moves. But this cat was normal, awake, walking around, minding its business, and they were zapping it. Sounds familiar? So, in colonies of cats and monkeys, aggression, dominance, mounting, and other social interactions have been evoked, modified, or inhibited by radio stimulation of specific cerebral areas, implying that social behavior may be controlled by radio stimulation of specific areas of the brain. So they were basically able to control the animal's social behavior, including aggression, bullying, sexual attraction, and other interactions. They were able to start, stop, and change these things through radio stimulation. That's huge. Most of the references to radio frequency stimulation date back to the late 1960s. I don't know if that is because this is now outdated technology, but nonetheless, it seemed to have been in common use during the time of Delgado's research. In an issue of Science had an article called Radio Frequency Stimulation, a Research and Clinical Tool. And the record of the article states, the radio frequency induction technique is now an important tool in physiological experiments and in the treatment of certain diseases. It has come to play an important role in the treatment of heart block in human patients where medication has been ineffective. In the case of bladder stimulation, work with animals has shown that the voiding of urine can be induced by electrical stimulation. The successful use of this technique on human patients has yet to be consistently achieved, but there is reason to be optimistic. So this is important because electronic harassment has been used to induce incontinence in TIs. In other words, these pathetic and disgusting people have tried to use this to make TIs urinate on themselves so that the TIs can be humiliated and experience mental distress. TIs, if this has happened to you, please don't comment right now. I will do a show on the health hazards of electronic harassment. It is too early to get into that right now without more solid proof of electronic harassment. So please hold on to comments on how electronic harassment has affected your digestive system until there's more solid proof to support your claims, or the beast might turn it around on you, make it into a joke, or make you look crazy. I just wanted to mention it here so some of the effects of electronic harassment could be known until it is proven. So, in the other parts of the book, it says autonomic and somatic functions, individual and social behavior, emotional and mental reactions may be evoked, maintained, modified, or inhibited, both in animals and in man, by electrical stimulation of specific cerebral structures. Physical control of many brain functions is a demonstrated fact, but the possibilities and limits of this control are still little known. And that's on page 15. And this statement confirms that many of the things TIs claim about electronic harassment are possible. So in another part, it says these accomplishments should familiarize us with the idea that we may also control the biological functions of living organisms from a distance. Cats, monkeys, or human beings can be induced to flex a limb, to reject food, or to feel emotional excitement under the influence of electrical impulses reaching the depths of their brains through radio waves purposely sent by an investigator. That's on page 16. This statement was made way back in the early 1970s by a scientist who spearheaded these experiments and wrote it in his book. In science, a hypothesis has to yield successful results that can be replicated by other scientists in order to be considered a scientific fact. This means that Delgado's experiments have been most likely replicated by other scientists and is now a scientific fact. Once this has happened, it can't be taken back. That knowledge is already out there for practically anyone to use. Let's be clear here. Way back in the early 1970s, a real scientist was able to use an electronic device to remotely control the mind, emotions, and bodies of not only animals, but also human beings. It is documented. So, when a TI has claims about electronic harassment, don't be so quick to dismiss it as crazy. Maybe someone should be looking into these claims. Maybe those someones should be a government department like the DOJ or the many other departments that are being paid by tax dollars to protect the US of A. We will now go on to the next 15 minutes. The part that I accidentally turned muted, he was just saying how he likes to experiment on rats. All right, so, but you can read it in the PDF I sent you. All right, so let's go through that. Almost 15 minutes. Less, it was whatever. Anyway, it says the contraction of the frog's legs is similar regardless of whether the muscle is stimulated directly through its motor nerve or through the brain, and this muscle action is also comparable to its activation during voluntary movements in the intact frog. The applied electricity does not create the limb movement, but acts as a depolarizing agent, starting a chain of events which depend on the properties of the stimulated organ. And that's on page 18 of the PDF I sent you. So this is good news for TIs. And now he's getting into his research now. This is the action. We're in the action part, okay? This is good news for TIs because what this paragraph is saying is that it isn't necessary to control the entire function. To move the frog's leg, the electricity is not performing the function as the body would by going through every step. All it does is provide a stimulus to start a domino effect to achieve the limb movement. Okay, picture this. You have a row of dominoes standing up back to back, right? You're at one end and the last domino is all the way at the other end. And all you want to do is cause that last domino to move or fall down. You are the electricity or the stimulus that the scientists would use. If this was a limb, if this was a limb, the body will go through a complicated chain of events to move the limb or the last domino. However, all you have to do is provide a stimulus in the right spot. All you have to do is tap the domino nearest to you, and it starts a chain of events so that the last domino will fall. You don't even have to touch it. If you blow on it hard enough, the domino nearest to you will fall and make the other dominoes fall over until it reaches the last one. Does that make sense? So the stimulus in electronic harassment has not completely taken over your body if you are a TI who's experiencing electronic harassment. And it has not completely taken over your mind. It just starts a chain of events that could possibly be stopped if you're not distracted or freaking out because you feel as if you're under mind control. There are times when you should freak out, but sometimes staying calm and having an idea of what is going on may help you stop the domino effect of the electronic harassment stimulus. So, so another part of the book goes, the mechanism for contraction and relaxation in the muscle fiber are pre-established in the biological structure of the cells. Electricity, like the nervous system itself, acts as a trigger for these processes. What does that mean? This scientist has learned how to target the reflexes and electronically stimulate the reflexes in a way to create complex actions other than the familiar knee jerk. The knee jerk was you go to the doctor, he hits a certain part of your knee pops up. Even if you don't have to do anything, it just happens because he hit your knee. All right. So this scientist has learned how to do more than that. He's learned how to tap something and you get up and walk or something like that. So, it's more than a knee jerk. So it could be that electronic harassment is also it could be that electronic harassment is also causing a reflex reaction similar to what this scientist has done. And then in another part, it says, in investigations of the brain as well as the muscle, electrical activation is preferable because it is not harmful for the cells and permits repeated studies of the same biological processes. By applying electricity, we can activate pre-established functional mechanisms of a structure and discover its possible role in spontaneous behavior by means of electrical stimulation of the brain. He refers to it later as ESP. You're going to hear ESP a lot, and that just means electrical stimulation of the brain. He goes on to say, it is possible to control a variety of functions, a movement, a glandular secretion, or a specific mental manifestation, depending on the chosen target. And that's on page 18. The science that Delgado is talking about is being used today in beauty treatments, medical procedures, and other common things. It is used to treat some psychiatric conditions. Those are some of its beneficial and acceptable uses. So you can't say that his science has disappeared completely. For people that wanted to lose weight, there was a device that was made to zap you with electricity when you wanted to overeat. And then it kind of like quelled your appetite. I couldn't find that video, so I couldn't show it to you. But I remember that. But I did find a video of a Pavlov bracelet that you can use to stop behaviors that you don't want. You can even allow people to remotely shock you. So while this is Pavlov's idea, that's a different scientist. While this is Pavlov's discovery and not Delgado's, it all follows the same types of science. I'm just trying to point out that the findings of Delgado's research is still being applied today in different forms. So it still exists and can be used in a bad way if it got into the wrong hands. With that, let's go through the next 15 minutes. Okay. So let's go through that 15 minutes. So it says, experience has confirmed the safety and usefulness of long-term implantations. Yeah. Experience has confirmed the safety and usefulness of long-term implantations of electrodes in man, and the procedure has been used in specialized medical centers around the world to help thousands of patients suffering from epilepsy, involuntary movements, intractable pain, anxiety, neurosis, and other cerebral disturbances. And that's on page 13 of the PDF that I gave the link to. And this just states that the implantation of electrodes was common and acceptable during the time of Delgado's research, and it also lists the common applications. And I thought that was important because as you can see from what I said before about electroceuticals, things are coming full circle. Um, yeah, and there's a reason for that. I'll give you a brief background on Delgado's research. Um, and you're going to know a lot about Delgado after this 3-week session. But let me give you a brief background. His experiment was shut down when people found out what he did. He did experiment on humans, and back in those days, I guess that was okay. It's not like it is now, and people were like, people didn't like his research, so they shut him down. And it was legitimate. He was a Yale professor. He studied at Yale. His research took place at Yale and everything, and it was acceptable in his time. But after he got these results and stuff, he went out and he started telling people about what he did, and there was like a public outroar. And his research was shut down, and now it's kind of like coming back. So that's why I wanted to read that sentence, because you're going to see that, I guess, anyway, you know what? I just want you to know that this research has been done before, and you're going to see that research come back, and it's going to apply to healing, certain ailments and all that stuff. But you will know, because you read this book and in this book club, that all this has been done before, and where it's coming from, and where it could possibly lead if the technology fought. I think it already fell into the wrong hands. But if it falls further into the wrong, well, it already fell into the wrong hands. So you know what I mean? If the public realizes it fell into the wrong hands. All right. So the next thing it says is, it is reasonable to speculate that in the near future, the stim receiver may provide the essential link from man to computer to man, with the a reciprocal feedback between neurons and instruments, which represents a new orientation for the medical control of neurophysiological functions. For example, it is conceivable that the localized abnormal electrical activity, which announces the imminence of an epileptic attack, could be picked up by implantable electrodes, telemetered to a distant instrument room, tape recorded, and analyzed by a computer capable of recognizing abnormal electrical patterns. And capable of recognizing abnormal electrical patterns. Identification of specific electrical disturbance could trigger the emission of radio signals to activate the patient's stim receiver and apply an electrical stimulation to a determined inhibitory area of the brain, thus blocking the onset of the convulsive episode. And that's on page 26. And I don't know where I read it, but I've read that something like this is being used or developed now. Either way, it sounds a bit like electroceuticals. And like I said before, like, just reading that, if you understood what it said, I know it could be complicated to understand if you're not like into science and stuff. Don't feel like you're stupid. You're not stupid. It's just that, not a lot of people are into science or could understand that just by reading at face value. Or reading it one time. Sometimes it takes several times, and sometimes it takes Googling certain things before you understand it. And that's fine. That's what's called learning. But even reading that, I could just see that as like an advertisement for a new for electroceuticals, or a new electrical device. I mean, think about it. I could see commercials like, "Oh my God, so you think you're getting a pimple? We have a device that could, you know, sense the onset of a pimple, and it'll send electrical, like, could you imagine like a cosmetics company giving you this device you put it on your skin or your body somewhere, and then it could sense pimples. It could sense that your body's about to create a pimple at their lab, and then all they do is just like zap you, and then it hits the pimple, and then that pimple never comes up. Like, I can see that's totally happening, and I can see people, like, saying, "Oh my god, that's so cool. This is so advanced," and I can see, like, it selling. I can see people, like, putting this device on themselves, and so that they don't have any pimples because the, cosmetic company has a bunch of computers that's gonna detect that you're getting a pimple and zap your skin so that that pimple never develops. Oh my gosh, yeah. I could definitely see that. So that's like when I read that, I'm like, oh my, I could see it coming back. And like I said, I don't want to like vilify Delgado's research. He was more interested, I think, I don't know, in preventing lobotomies because lobotomies are brutal and they shouldn't have been done. Um, so he was just offering an alternative to lobotomies. That, from what I've read about him, was his motivation. He wasn't trying to take over the world or have mind control or anything like that. I can't wait. Okay, I gotta wait to the third part when I catch you up on when I give you more information on his background and what happened to him and his research and everything like that. All right, and then you can. Okay, so I'm not gonna spoil it for you. No spoilers. So yeah, so let's leave it like that. So you can see this coming back around, and as a POI and a TI, you can see the general public just accepting this, but because you're a TI and you know the bad part of this how this technology can be used badly, it's like this is what blows my mind, because I was like, oh my gosh, people are gonna like put these devices on themselves, and then like if a psychopath wanted to take over, they could just take over these devices and do what they want to do. And that's why I think it's important to invest for investigations to be done on the TI's claims, because I think TIs have valuable information on these new technologies that are coming up, and TIs can offer insight into that slippery slope, into what could happen if this worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario, I feel like on some level, is being tested out right now on a small group of people. And it's just so important. I mean, not ramble, I can ramble on about this. So anyway, so I just wanted to point that out. And then the next part, it says it would obviously be far more desirable to employ minute instruments which could be implanted completely beneath the skin. For this purpose, we have developed in our laboratory a small 3-channel stimulator which can be placed subcutaneously and which has terminal leads to be implanted within the brain. And then later on, it says an experiment was begun in monkey Nona and in chimpanzee Susie, who were equipped with subcutaneous stimulators to activate their brains from time to time for the rest of their lives. Terminal contacts were located in motor pathways in order to evoke flexion of the contralateral leg. An effect simple enough to be observed and quantified without difficulty. And then later on it says, thus the technical problem of stimulating any desired area of the brain for as long as necessary in the absence of conductors passing through the skin has been solved. Therapeutic and scientific possibilities have been multiplied, and the comfort of subjects has been considerably increased. And that's on page 27. Delgado also, I think, he really is a pioneer. His research just scared a whole bunch of people, so he didn't get the recognition that he would have gotten had his research not scared a whole bunch of people. But he developed a device that was able to give doses of medication just by being implanted. And then, like, I was just thinking while I was reading this, isn't that like that birth control thing that they have, the Nova Ring or something? You just implant it under your skin, and it doses you. And it doses, if you're a female, it doses you with it gives you doses of birth control. You don't have to do anything. I mean, like, this is just bizarre. But yeah, he thought of that. I think he was doing that way back in the 1960s. So, and then look, we have it, now. So that's just to piggyback on what I said before. So anyway, back to what I just read. The chimps were mind controlled their whole life, and they were basically unaware of it because the implants were undetectable and it caused little to no comfort. So what I just read, what it basically said was, and I think that was pretty self-explanatory. They just Did they chip them? I think they chipped a bunch of monkeys. They chipped 2 monkeys, and all they wanted to do is they wanted to see how long they could keep, the chips in the monkey's head and, like, control them, control their limb movement. And the thing that they chose was like, okay, we're gonna make this monkey lift their leg for the rest of their life on, when we tell them to. And it worked. They chipped the monkeys, and for the rest of those monkeys' lives, they were walking around minding their business and their leg would just lift. It's ridiculous. But it worked and he achieved his goal. Um, and they probably didn't think anything of it. They're probably like, "Oh, I have this weird habit." Well, monkeys can't talk, but if monkeys talk, if monkey could talk, they were just like, every once in a while my legs just lifts. I don't know. It's just a kink in my mind or anything. Little they know, somebody was causing that. Anyway, so not that the monkeys were worried. I'm sure. Well, they probably were. And I don't know. Whatever. So fears have been expressed. It goes on to say fears have been expressed that this new technologies bring with it the threat of possible unwanted and unethical remote control of cerebral activities of men by other men. Really? But as will be discussed later, this danger is quite improbable and is outweighed by the expected clinical and scientific benefits. If you say so, right? On page 29. I can't wait to find out how he explains away the threat of possible unwanted and unethical remote control of the cerebral activities of a man by other men. Stay tuned for that one. All right, so with that, let's go on to the next 15 minutes. Okay. So, let's talk about that 15 minutes. So it says in scientific literature, there's already a substantial amount of information demonstrating the remarkable effects induced by ESP. The heart, for instance, can be stopped for a few beats, slowed down, or accelerated by suitable stimulation of determined cortical and subcortical structures, illustrating the physiological reality that it is the brain which controls the heart and not vice versa. Respiratory rate and amplitude have been driven by ESB. Gastric secretion and motility have also been modified by brain stimulation. The diameter of the pupil can be adjusted at will from maximum constriction to maximum dilation as if it were a photographic camera. Scary. Simply by changing the intensity knob of an electrical stimulator connected with the hypothalamic region of the brain. And that's on pages 29 to 31 of the PDF I sent you. This chapter goes through most of the complaints that TIs have made about electronic harassment. I've heard complaints regarding some TIs have claimed that they have felt symptoms of heart attacks. They have had respiratory issues and also visual issues due to some remote stimuli. And then in another part, it says the surprising fact is that depending on its location, electrical stimulation of the brain is able to evoke not only simple responses, but also complex and well organized behavior, which may be indistinguishable from spontaneous activity. And that's on page 20, and that's on page 32 of the PDF. So it is possible that you could be sitting still and suddenly jump up and do something spontaneous. Sometimes you're caught off guard by this sudden activity, right? Excuse me. Sometimes you're caught off guard by this sudden activity, but you go with the flow because after all, it was you who initiated the action, right? You did that. You just jumped up suddenly, right? Well, a TI said that she was sitting on a chair in a public computer lab when she suddenly turned around and fell off the chair due to her heavy book bag. She laughed it off and wondered why she suddenly turned around so quickly. She remembered that some guy was passing by and he looked at her with a smirk. This was in the beginning of the campaign when she had no clue what was happening, so she blamed it on herself and fatigue. Now that she has an idea of what was happening, she thinks the guy was trying to get her to check him out and use electronic harassment to make her turn. But because the chair was a swivel chair and she wanted to use the computer quickly, so she wasn't seated properly with a heavy book bag on her back, he was able to provide a stimulus that caused her to turn and look at him, but she lost her balance while doing so. There are so many videos of TIs with videos of people, excuse me, there are so many TIs have made a lot of videos where there are so many videos of TIs with videos of people just sitting around, and the TIs claiming that that person was somehow using electronic harassment because they had a phone or some kind of device pointed at the TI. Well, the Pavlov, I think I said Pavlov before, the Pavlov watch mentioned earlier allowed a friend to remotely zap the person wearing the watch. The electronic harassment, or device the beasts are using can be used as an app on a common electronic device. One of the main questions, so maybe that person pointing their phone at the TI, it's possible that it could be happening. It's possible. So one of the main questions um, that TIs have is, are TIs implanted with some kind of electronic receiver? Some TIs claim that they are, and they claim to have proof. You can watch their videos because I don't really know about the implants. I do know that there is smart dust that can be placed on individuals and act as a receiver or transmitter. PLN has a video on smart dust. Smart dust is real, and it is being used by the general public for normal reasons. I've heard the beast, or the gang stalker, sometimes I call it the gang stalker beast. I've heard the beast subliminally say that they have sprayed someone with something. Um, if a TI, so if a TI, and the reason why I say that is because when I in the video, if you watch PLN's video on smart dust, what they do is how they use it for in agriculture is a plane, I think, passes by and it sprays the whole crop field with smart dust. And then what they do is they use they use a computer to get information about what's going on with the crops and the plants after the smart dust has been placed on the crops, which is kind of scary if you think about it, because later on in the video, it says that they don't know how to remove the smart dust. So if they're spraying, this just hit me. So if they're spraying crops with this smart dust to get readings and stuff, how are they cleaning it? I hope they're cleaning it off, and I hope it could come off, because then I guess we're ingesting that stuff, which is weird. But I mean, they're supposed to wash crops, right? Well, wash your vegetables and stuff. Anyway, so, and don't quote me on that. That just hit me when I thought about it. I haven't looked into it or anything like that. So anyway, so the planes spray the crops with smart dust, and then what they do, and the reason why they do that is because it's too hard for them to go through like each plant and get the reading. So when they spray the smart dust, that allows them to get more information than they would if they did it like the traditional way. And then they would get the reading and find out whatever information they needed to get about the crops and all that stuff using the computer, because the smart dust was like relaying information back to them. And it's really tiny too. So that's why I mentioned that subliminally, the beasts have said that they'll spray somebody with something. And I was just like, what are they spraying people with? What does that mean? Anyway, so if TIs are not implanted with microchips, then the beasts could have placed material that is similar to smart dust. And I call that electronic harassment particles, or EHP. And that can act as a receiver and transmitter to accommodate an app on the beast's phone, device on their cars, etc. So again, smart dust does exist, and it is being advanced now, and it exists. It's being researched on now, and it's being advanced now. So my theory that I just read you is pretty up to date. And I'm saying that because we're kind of reading about Delgado's research, and Delgado's research was like way back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. But this, what I just told you about smart dust, is up to date. So in the experiment, let's go back. In the experiment of the cats being lifted, and this is my opinion, not something the book read, the cat probably thought it was doing those movements. Okay, in the experiment of the cat's leg being lifted, the cat probably thought it was doing those movements because the mind doesn't have any information of anyone being able to remotely control its limb movements. The mind is unaware of this external stimuli and would explain it away, just like the TI explained away suddenly turning around and falling off the chair. She admits that she felt this strange sensation to suddenly turn, and that didn't feel as if it was coming for her. That didn't feel like it was coming from her. But because there was no explanation for it besides something supernatural, she just dismissed the whole event, even though it kept bothering her. And she did. She was like, "Something's telling me to turn around." And yeah, haven't you said that? Like, something's telling me to look this way or look that way. So she just like, okay, well, whatever. And so now that she has some answer for what Oh, now she has some answer for what happened. And as for the cats, I want to point out another way the electronic domino effect stimulus could have been used. If the experimenter wanted to make the cat fall off the table, causing the lift of one leg could have done that. So if the experiment had looked at the cat and said, okay, I'm going to make that cat fall off the table. Okay. So the experimenter doesn't have to go through the whole thing of like shaking the table, going to the cat, pushing the cat, putting devices that will like cause some kind of impact on the cat to move. All the experiment has to do, remember, domino effect is push that one domino, and pushing that domino nearest was lifting the cat's leg. So if you know, if you have the PDF up, or if you want to go look at the PDF, um, the picture on page 34 shows the cat appeared to be near the edge of the table. So the cat was already at the edge of the table. The experimenter wants to push the cat off the table. It's not complicated. Domino effect. Lift that leg, the cat loses balance. That cat's off the table. So it's a lot easier than it's not as complicated as it seems in most cases. But the cat had a good balance, and that's the only thing that stopped it from falling. And then later on, also note that the cat's mind was being distracted in the experiment by being petted, therefore allowing the stimulus to be more effective. And there's a part also where he's talking about the cat was in mid jump. And what they did was they contracted the leg while the cat was in mid jump. And what the cat did was it was able to like readjust itself so it landed perfectly. And this is important, TIs. So what they did was like, okay, we're going to increase the stimulus. So the cat jumped again, and they increased the stimulus on the cat's leg, and the cat wasn't able to adjust, and it landed badly. So just remember that, because it talks about how they the intensity of the electrical stimulus could get the effect that they wanted. So when the cat was leaning there, when the cat was at the edge of the table, well, I don't know. Let me not go into that because I don't know. But just keep that in mind. All right. So another reason why the experimenters can cause a domino effect is because the mind is aware that the body can be reflexive. Sometimes you sneeze. You don't wonder why you sneeze. You know your body's going to sneeze sometimes. Well, you probably have something in your nose, so you sneeze. Sometimes you just shift your weight. Like, I've been sitting like this for a while. My leg is probably falling asleep, so my body's going to shift. I'm going to be like, oh my God, they moved me. It's just the body has spontaneous movement sometimes to adjust, Sometimes you lose your train of thoughts. You see me do that a lot. Sometimes you yawn, sometimes you stretch or do other things spontaneously. The body just does this to keep itself comfortable, and the mind doesn't question it. It seems as if that is what the mind is interpreting the body's sudden movement as. And the body, however, can pick up that something is wrong, but it senses no danger in permitting the activity that it would normally do. So, like if I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, and my body, and I shift the body. Let's say if there was electronic harassment causing me to shift, my body wouldn't sense any danger in me shifting my weight. I guess it'd be like, well, I guess this leg is asleep. So it's like the body's not interpreting it as a danger, so it'll just go ahead with the motion, even though it may have been suggested otherwise. It may have been a stimulus causing me to do so. The experimenters, and what's happening with the experimenter, like that cat. I mean, the cat's just in there being petted and minding its business. Next thing you know, his leg is going up, but he's so busy being petted that he doesn't care. He's like, well, I guess my leg just wants to lift, right? And so then, and what the experiments did in that is that they were hiding the electrical. The experimenters were hiding the electrical stimulus in plain sight. I have observed the beast using the hiding in plain sight technique a lot in the stalking, in the harassment, and in the electronic harassment. The beasts are hiding their activities, but they are hiding it in plain sight. Okay? I can't spell it out for you because the beasts also watch my videos. I can only give you information so that you can start to figure out things for yourself. So another part is says to induce walking in an animal by programmed electrical stimulation of individuals' muscles would be a formidable task requiring the wiring of perhaps muscles, the use of a complex computer, sophisticated timing mechanisms, large numbers of stimulators with instantaneously adjustable intensities, many sensors, and the help of a team of scientists and technicians, in addition to a cooperative animal and a measure of good luck. The surprising fact is that electrical pulses applied directly to the brain activate cerebral structures which possess the necessary functional complexity to induce walking with apparently normal characteristics. Page 36. Like they can make an animal get up and walk. Okay. So this is good news. That's not good news, but this is good news for everybody because Delgado didn't achieve total control of the body. The way a body works, animal or human, is much too complex and labor intensive for even modern machines to do that, to gain like complete control of your body. So causing a domino effect is easier. However, it seems that the scientists have to sneak the stimulus in. They have to get around the will, and it seems as if the body and mind's compliance is based on both thinking that it came from one or the other. So the body's thinking it's coming from the mind is thinking it's coming from the body. Okay, you got the green light. The body's like, what the heck is this? You're being stopped. Like everything's coming out to fight you. The mind senses something. It's like, wait, whoa, 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 that's not for me. The mind's going to start to fight you. But if you sneak it in, and one thinks this is the other, or the body thinks, oh, well, I guess my arm felt uncomfortable, so move. It's easier that way. So imagine so in that way, you could imagine what response the science would get. Excuse me. So in that way, you could imagine what response the scientists would get if the body or the mind was aware that there was a possibility for the whole system to be taken over by an external stimulus. Both the body and the mind would fight like the cat did when the experimenter tried to hold down his leg. So, and that goes back. So in that 15 minutes, what happened was they stimulated the leg to lift while the cat was being petted. The cat had no problem, right? My leg is lifting. I don't care. I'm being petted. The body's like, my leg is lifting. So what? No issue. I'll just balance myself a bit better. I don't know what's going on there, but it's not hurting me. The mind was like, that leg is lifting. Oh, the body must be lifting the leg for some reason. Okay. But then when the experimenter, so what they did was they stimulated the cat's leg again, and the experimenter tried to hold down the cat's leg. The cat fought, mind and body fought that because so it was like an external person trying to force the cat to hold down its leg. Which was what is more interesting is that they stimulated the leg to lift, and the cat thought that it wanted its leg to lift. It didn't know that it was under external stimulus. So then when the experimenter held it down, the cat started fighting it because the cat just felt like my leg wants to lift, and this guy is stopping me from lifting my leg. I'm gonna fight that person. That's like a twist. That's even more interesting that the cat fought for the stimulus that didn't even come from the cat because the cat didn't even know it came from. Anyway, I'm gonna confuse you. So anyway, but yeah. So what is happening is this is probably why the beasts are still sneaking around and haven't had their big entrance as the invincible mind control entities they wish they were. They haven't got this mind control thing completely figured out yet. And that is good news for everybody, even them. It's not too late to stop this network, and something can be done. All right, so let's go into the last 15 minutes of this. Okay. So that's the final 15 minutes of today. So let's talk about that. Let's go over that a little bit. So, really notice the way they manipulated Monkey Ludi and how the monkey responded. So, it says Monkey Ludi had one contact implanted in the red nucleus, and when it was stimulated for 5 seconds, the following effects appeared. Immediate interruption of spontaneous activity. Two, change in facial expression. Three, turning of the head to the right. Four, standing on 2 feet. Um, Five, circling to the right. Six, walking on 2 feet with perfect balance, using both hands to maintain equilibrium during bipedestation. 7, climbing a pole. 8, descending to the floor. 9, uttering a growl. 10, threatening and often attacking and biting a subordinate monkey. 11, changing aggressive attitude and approaching the rest of the group in a friendly manner. 12, assuming peaceful, spontaneous behavior. This complex sequence of events took place during 10 to 14 seconds, always in the same order, but with considerable flexibility in the details of performance. Ludi avoided obstacles in her path, walked with excellent coordination, and used normal strategies in her fights. The sequential response was so reliable that it persisted after 20,000 stimulations repeated once every minute, demonstrating the demonstrating the specificity of evoked effects, and that was on page 42. Imagine that happening with a person. The person will look crazy, right? The person would be expressing rapid mood change, excuse me, the person would be expressing rapid mood swings, pacing back and forth, and other crazy behavior. The experimenters were confused by Ludi's response, but maybe Ludi was starting to be aware of some unwanted external stimuli, or maybe she recognized the stimulus was not from her and was trying in some strange way to make it stop. Maybe all that was just Ludi acting out her frustration over the unwanted electrical stimulus. I think I have watched crazy people act similar to this, and now I wonder if they were crazy or were they controlled. It's so strange knowing about all this because the world appears different now, and things aren't so black and white anymore. In another part of the book, it says no robot performance. So brain stimulation, and it says brain stimulation activates cerebral mechanisms which are organized for motor performance, but it cannot replace them. With the present state of the art, it is very unlikely that we could electrically direct an animal to carry out predetermined activities such as opening a gate or performing an instrumental response. We can induce pleasure or punishment and therefore the motivation to press a lever, but we cannot control the sequence of movements necessary for this act in the absence of the animal's own desire to do so, as will be discussed later. We can evoke emotional states which may motivate an animal to attack another. Page 42. As will be discussed in later, as will be discussed later, we can evoke emotional states which may motivate an animal to attack another. Page 42. All right. So at the time of Delgado's experiment, um, he was not able to produce a robot-like response, which supports what I was saying before that his research hasn't shown a complete takeover of the subject's body. While this is comforting, remember that Delgado's book was written in the early 1970s, and if his research was continued since then, whether publicly or privately, it's hard to know how advanced it is in the year 2020. Another part says, then the patient was warned of the oncoming stimulation and was asked to keep his hands, and was asked to keep his fingers extended. He could not prevent the evoked movement and commented, I guess, doctor, that your electricity is stronger than my will. And that was on page 43. This is what the beast wants you to believe. That they want you to believe that they have somehow taken over your will, your mind, body, and dare I say, your soul. I think the reason he couldn't prevent the movement is because he didn't know how. I don't think Delgado explained the process and what he was doing to him. him meaning the patient. It could be that if the subject had more information about what was happening, he could have somehow figured out how to stop it. Delgado already said that the stimulus didn't work all the time, even though it had enough consistency to be legitimate. Also, remember that his research was done mostly on mentally ill people who already had a weakened or disturbed mindset. During the video, I started during like the reading when he was reading the 15. He talked about the electronic harassment being used to make the subject shift, and then they would ask the subject, "Oh, why did you turn your head? Why did you shift?" And the subject would like make up a reason for it, like, "Oh, I guess I heard something, or I dropped something. I'm looking for my slippers." And I wanted to like when they said that, I wanted to say, "Oh yeah, that's what I was trying to point out before when I said that the mind just explains it away." So he thought that too. But I stopped myself from saying it because if I start talking, then you won't hear what the narrator was reading. Um, so if you heard me start saying something, I had to stop myself because I was like, I can't say it because that's gonna like, you know, the narrator's gonna keep reading. So in another part, it says the interesting fact was that the patient considered the evoked activity spontaneous. Oh, here, it's ironic. The interesting fact was that the patient considered the evoked activity spontaneous and always offered a reasonable explanation for it. When asked, "What are you doing?" The answers were, "I am looking for my slippers. I heard a noise. I'm restless." And I was looking under the bed. In this case, it was difficult to ascertain whether the stimulation had evoked a movement which the patient tried to justify, or if an hallucination had been elicited, which subsequently induced the patient to move and to explore the surroundings. And that's on page 44. This confirms what I said earlier, that the person thinks the movement came from them, and the mind makes up an excuse for it. I read or listened to the book in the 15-minute intervals, and then I wrote my comments in that section. I don't read ahead. So if it seems repetitive, it just shows that my conclusions are correct. And even if my conclusions weren't correct, I would not hide that either because you can learn from your mistakes, right? So that's the first part of the book. Thank you for sticking with me. Yes, it was boring in the beginning. It started off really slow and boring, but I think it's becoming more relevant and more interesting now. Next week's discussion will finish chapter 14 and start the first few paragraphs of chapter 19 for those who want to read or skim next week's chapter before the TI hour. Like I say, it's okay if you don't understand it. You could always ask me questions. I'll give the best answer I could give. And then you could always look into it to like and do your own little like Google search, research or whatever to find an answer for yourself. Um, so I'm going to end this now, but please come back in a few minutes for random talk, or watch it on the replay because I have a videos that can introduce you to more of Delgado's research and show a recent research that is relevant to this topic. So I'm going to close this down. I'm going to close this now, and then I'm going to come back in a few minutes just to do a quick it's not supposed to be long, but I'm gonna do a quick video. I'm gonna show you a few, like 3 videos or something, just to like gel this together. Anyway, I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay. All right. Thank you for watching. Bye.